it occurred to me that the only reason I was able to do what I was doing was because everybody else that I was staying with made an opposite choice. Right? I'm going to have this cool experience at this farm or this cool experience at that farm. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over there and see all these cool things. Well, all those cool things were built by people not doing what I was doing. I tripped across a tweet the other day, which is pretty hard for me because I'm not perusing Twitter, so people share tweets on some other platform. And it caught my interest. Which... No feedback loops, Nima.
I'm sorry.
It caught my interest because it was... It's not obvious at first, but it was validating and what's the word I'm looking... glorifying laziness. And it was doing it in a way that I think resonates very well with the millennial population. What's that, Nima?
Well, just say what it's promoting specifically. It's not laziness, it's a specific ideology, right?
Well, here, you want to load it up? We'll read it. Okay. So this is from some chick. It says, unpopular opinion. I don't think your life has to have a purpose or you a grand ambition. I think it's okay to just wander through life finding interesting things until you die. Now, I will admit, I used to think this way. Did you ever think this way, Nima? I don't think you did, based on what you've told me you've done with your life.
Well, no, I wouldn't say I never went that far, but I've certainly veered in that direction off and on, I would say.
And there's an appeal here. Nima, you want to switch us back? There's an appeal here, right? Because you
did you read it already?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
You find yourself on the surface of this earth. You just happen to be here at a time when things are relatively safe and you can travel all around the world relatively cheaply, and we can connect to everywhere in the world instantaneously. And for whatever reason, our generation, has really glorified traveling, right? And so you go around and you have these cool experiences. What are you laughing at?
I hate this glorification of traveling as if it's the end all be all.
Well, and I'm personally going to exemplify it, right? Because I did the backpack through Europe thing for 2.5 fucking years.
Well,
right?
So just anecdotally, when I was still in the dating market, like 80-90% of the ladies' dating profiles, they always said something along the lines of the things I like. I like traveling and I like food, and that's it. It's like, oh wow, do you have any interesting purpose, any interesting desires or interests in life? Anything deeper, or is it just getting on a plane and chewing on food?
Right.
Is that yeah?
Is that the end all to your existence? And
right,
then
right.
I mean, again, I understand the appeal because I lived it, right? Because you say, okay, there's all this cool stuff out there. I really want to go see this cool stuff and experience this cool stuff. And in me in particular, when I traveled, I discovered certain networks, like specific websites. I'll say them. One's helpx.net. This is this website that I used that connects farmers, typically organic hippie farmers, with people who want to help, and they let you stay and they feed you in exchange for a certain amount of work. And I did that for not the full 2 years. I found out it was more interesting to hook up with foreign women. After busting my ass shoveling shit on farms in various corners of Europe. But yeah, I mean, I as I was doing it, so I started this when I was like 23, I ended it right before I turned 27. And if you're like, well, your math doesn't add up because I left out a year where I was actually I lived in another state. I moved to Vermont from Washington, and then from there I jumped up to Europe. And I thought I was doing great. I thought I was accomplishing a lot by going out, doing all these crazy experiences. And one of the things that I personally, one of my personal, I don't know if philosophy is the right term here, but one of my goals was to so not have goals in the future that if I simultaneously threw myself into a difficult situation, which is to say I bought a one-way plane ticket and showed up in the middle of Austria, right? Can I handle it? And how long can I handle it? And I handled it for over 2 years. I just kept going and going and going. And I was helping people. I mean, I've read something since then, like there's this trend now where people will actually beg. Like they'll go traveling and they'll beg for money, and they literally have a sign that says, "I'm traveling, please give me money." I never did that shit. I worked wherever I went, right? But I thought I was being productive and in quotes good and contributing to something because I would help wherever I went. But at one day, and this was close to the end of me doing this, I woke up and I had two occurrences. The first one is that if I don't stop doing this shit, I'm going to still be doing this shit when I'm 50, right? I'm 26 now. I need to either make a commitment that I'm going to stay here and like start a life or go back home. And obviously I ended up deciding to come back home, which thank God I decided that. That was like right before I think that was 2013, right before the whole migrant invasion happened. So I'm glad I made that fucking decision. And the second thing was, it occurred to me that the only reason I was able to do what I was doing was because everybody else that I was staying with made an opposite choice. Right? I'm going to have this cool experience at this farm or this cool experience at that farm. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go over there and see all these cool things. Well, all those cool things were built by people not doing what I was doing. Right? Those are things that were built by people who had a goal, who had a vision, and had a drive to go do something. So we look at this girl who's like, well, you don't need a purpose in life. You don't need a big goal. You could just walk around and find interesting things. Well, cool story, but the only reason that you're able to walk around and find interesting things is because they were built by people who had goals and vision. Nima, did you freeze up? Nima? There you are.
I can hear you.
There you are. You froze up for a second.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my connection isn't so good. It just told me my connection is unstable. Damn it.
You know what it might be? We're getting hit by a fucking solar flare right now. I wonder if that's the case.
Yeah.
X-class solar flare just popped.
So, and I have a Wi-Fi, but I have a pretty good Wi-Fi router. But let me reorient one of its antennas real quick.
Okay, I'll keep talking about my experiences in Europe. I mean, just to give an example of what I mean by trying to make things as difficult as possible, I started hitchhiking because taking trains, that's for pussies, or finding a ride with a friend or something, that's for a pussy. I'm like, okay, I'm in Vienna. And I've got a thing in Augsburg, Germany that I want to get to. It's typically a 5-hour drive, but I mapped out all the places that I would probably need to stop at. I'm like, okay, so from Vienna to Salzburg, that's a straight shot. From Salzburg to Munich, that's a straight shot. And from Munich to Augsburg, that's a straight shot. So I made signs with, here's my Salzburg sign, here's my Munich sign, and here's my Augsburg sign. I looked up on Google Maps and said, okay, here's the freeway. Here's probably a safe place to stand where people are slow enough to see where I'm standing, and they can pull over once they see me if they decide they want to pick me up. And I'd go fucking hitchhike and see if I can make it in a day, and I did. I made it from Vienna to Salzburg in one day just hitchhiking. And people warning me of axe murderers and that no one's gonna pick you up or whatever. I should say in German, es tut mein Ego gut. It felt really good for my ego to be able to say, ha, I did it. I told you I could do it. But again, like going back to what this girl was saying, like, okay, you don't need a purpose. You can just go around experiencing interesting things. That was a very interesting thing for me to experience, and I'd even argue that was, kind of character developing for me. Nima, I'm talking about hitchhiking from Vienna to Augsburg in one day that I did while I was in.
And thanks, Jesus. Jesus says everything's fine on his end. So
Okay.
thank you.
If by if by solar flare you mean crappy internet, everything's fine on my end. Shut the fuck up, Jesus. Yeah. So I mean, like, I think there was some like character development in what I did because I'm putting myself through difficult stuff, but at the same time, I'm not accomplishing anything. Like, if having done all that, if I were to die the next day, there's nothing left to be like, well, here's what Dylan left behind. Right? I mean, okay, for example, at one point I was in Turkey, in Istanbul, and I went to the Hagia Sophia.
Been there, yeah.
Somebody with some drive and vision and goals, probably more than one person, made that motherfucker. In stages, because people kept conquering and it fell apart a couple times and whatever. But this mindset has like entirely infected our generation. And again, I don't know about the Zoomers, but at least the millennials, it's entirely infected our generation that we don't try to do anything lasting in the world that we live in. We just try to, see it as we zip by and go, okay, that was fun. And I mean, coming to this realization for myself is what made me flip around and start doing things like I'm doing today and looking back going, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. But we've got an entire generation of people doing this. Or I should say, maybe half the generation, right? I think half the millennials are like this and half of them are more traditional, get a job, hardworking and such. But half is a lot. So I saw this tweet. I was thinking about it. I was thinking about it in concurrence with my own experience, and it occurred to me. I think this is a form of nihilism, where everything is meaningless. Because I mean, think about it. If you don't have a purpose, you don't have a goal. Okay, maybe nihilism may not acknowledge that something might be interesting, but if you don't have a purpose and you don't have a goal and therefore there's no meaning to anything, then how's that any different from nihilism?
I mean, I was just going to say, how is it not nihilism, what she's proposing there? I would absolutely put that in that category. It suffers from the typical nihilist contradictions because what she is proposing there is a goal for her life. And what she is proposing there is an ambition for her life. It's just a very lazy one and a very scattery one, but it's nonetheless an ambition that she's proposing. It's okay to just wander through life finding interesting things. Well, what is interesting? So you have some method of determining, or you have some process of determining what's interesting, and that's an ambition, that's a goal, and find interesting things until you die.
Yeah. And I suspect, and again, I'm able to look at myself and my past for this level of introspection, right? I suspect that when you have a goal like this, because as Nima just pointed out, it is a goal. You can claim, oh, I don't have any goals. I just look for interesting things. Well, yes, that in itself is a goal. But I think the desire here is the lack of responsibility, right? Because if you don't have a goal, if you don't accomplish things, then you can't be responsible for anything.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, in terms of our own accomplishments, Nima, I mean, focus on you for a second. So for those who may not know, Nima was a pretty big player, I guess you kind of still are, in the auction world. Nima developed software for auction systems that are like someone bought his company and they still use his software, and they sell big shit. Like when they sell movie sets or they sell Rockstar paraphernalia or whatever, they're using Nima's auction software.
Yeah, so some of the most expensive memorabilia have been sold through the software. I mean, from one particular auction house that I still work with, but also I mean, auction houses around the world still use the software. The company's still employing people. It's still serving a purpose out there. It's still improving itself, even though I'm not with the company anymore. So that's something that, there's people that I hired back in the days that are still with the company, and some of them are abroad, some of them are in the Philippines where people don't have much, and this has given them a skill set that they can use for the rest of their lives, and this has given them a purpose and a means to feed their families. So
there's something you can point back. Sorry to interrupt. So there's something you can point back and say, I did that. Here's a lasting impact from Nima. Right? And then, I mean, even when you were running the business, I think you said it was you and one other partner, right? That you had a serious responsibility. I mean, even overlooking the employees, you're like, okay, we've started this thing. Okay, here's this rocket. We're trying to get it off the ground and into space. It's off the ground, it's in the air, but we got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing in order to get into space, right? You have built this thing and you're carrying this load of responsibility where if you go, nah, forget it, that thing crashes down, right? That's stressful.
Oh yeah,
it's super stressful, and I'm sure you felt this way a couple times. You're like, why the fuck am I doing this? Is this going to go anywhere? Right? Is this just going to crash on its own?
There's been rough periods, rough times, no doubt.
Yeah.
Especially the 2008 recession in the U.S. And it takes a goal, it takes an ambition that is bigger than all the challenges and pitfalls that you encounter along the way.
Yeah. And I mean, if your mindset was never have a goal and never have a vision, or a purpose is the term that she used, then you never have to worry about having the responsibility of such an endeavor. Right? I mean, again, forgetting the other people dependent on you, just the responsibility of you to yourself. Like, here's this thing I'm doing. Do I just walk away from it or not?
Yeah. And right. that was never an option for me because
you had a goal and a purpose.
I had a goal and a purpose, but why did I have a goal and a purpose? Because I grew up with not very necessarily much, and mostly our family was, I wouldn't say they were necessarily struggling, but we definitely had to ration and deal with shortages of money here and there. And I went to a school in an area with lots of rich kids. So I think that was the inception of that vanity that gave me the drive to achieve something bigger.
Well, and then let's explore that. So you're not, well, I mean, it doesn't sound like you were like dirt floor poor, but you're not rich, right? And like you mentioned, there's some struggle there, and you go in and see the rich kids. Why did that inspire you to do better as opposed to just pissing you off and separating you from wanting to do that? Because that happens to a lot of people. Good question.
I would say because good question. Because I just saw especially the era we grew up in, there was opportunities everywhere. So I could not possibly accept that, this just ticks me off and I'm not going to do anything, because I guess I saw the people who thought that way and they didn't inspire me, they didn't impress me, they didn't seem to be happy with what they were doing. So that was probably why I had the drive to.
I got to compare this to my drive that I had when I made the decision to do the Vagabond thing. So when I was in college, I majored in chemistry, And my junior year, I got a job as a laboratory technician at one of the local oil refineries. I went to school in Bellingham, Washington, and there's two refineries up north from there. There's a ConocoPhillips and a BP. I got to work at the ConocoPhillips. And the idea, technically, I was an intern, but I did the same thing as everybody else did. They paid me, but not as much as it would pay a non-contractor, right? That ConocoPhillips gives all these benefits to all their employees, but only half the people working there are employees. The other half are contractors. That's how they get around that. But so I'm a contractor. I got paid pretty well for a college student. I'll admit that. And I had a guaranteed job upon graduation. I mean, I literally could still be working there today, right? Now, I'm sitting there in this laboratory for many, many, many hours, and a lot of times there wasn't that much to do, particularly on the weekends. And I thought about this, and I'm like, okay, the head chemists here, they make about $60,000 a year. This was 2007. They make about $60,000 a year. And I'm like, well, what can I get with $60,000 a year? First of all, I'm going to have to move here, and I don't necessarily want to live here. I'm going to have to buy a meh house. I'm going to have to buy a meh car. So I'm going to live in a place I don't want to live in a house I don't want to live, have a car that I don't like to get to a job that I don't want to get to. And I said, fuck this. I'd rather be dirt fucking poor than deal with this shit. So I quit screaming before I graduated, and after I graduated, I did the martial art apprentice thing for my Aikido instructor at a Shinto shrine. So if you ever see those kung fu movies where they're like, carrying buckets of water up a hill, that was me. I was doing that shit. And then after I did that for 6 months, and then after that, I'm like, how do I get myself even lower? And I'm like, I'm just gonna leave. And I bought a one-way plane ticket to Vermont without telling anybody. I just bought it. And then I told everybody and I left. And I was there for a year. And I did it again. I said, okay, I'm going to buy a one-way plane ticket to Europe before I tell anybody. And I did it, and I left. And for me, the idea of doing something in order to accumulate enough money to say I'm rich or whatever, it didn't even occur to me. Didn't even fucking cross my mind. And I felt at odds with people who were like that because I couldn't even conceptualize what it'd be like there. I could only visualize, okay, here's middle class per the description I just gave of like, okay, I hate this job and I hate where I live and I just drive in between the two. Versus, hey, I don't have much, but I could just go around doing whatever I want because I have some level of freedom. I find it very fascinating that we had two completely different reactions to the frustration looking at the situation we grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what would cause the difference.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the vagabond proposition would not have worked because I would have considered that to be a situation where you're constantly in want and you are dependent on others.
Mm-hmm.
You're dependent on other people's money, on jobs from other people, even if it's just odd jobs you're doing here and there. You never have that feeling of comfort and achievement and a situation where you just I can relax a little bit. I can do what I feel like doing because you can't do that unless you have the means to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's why.
Well, I think maybe I figured out the answer. So, getting a little more personal here, my parents were divorced when I was 4, and my mom was, I would say still is, a fucking psycho. And she was such a psycho that when I was in my 20s, I stumbled across an article discussing narcissistic parents. And the description of the narcissistic parent fit my mother so perfectly, I thought this person was like spying on me my whole life and wrote a fucking article about me. It was like that specific. Or I should say, it was that accurate of a description of what I experienced. And to your point of, you can never relax, you can never have any sort of sense of being settled. Well, I never had that in my house. Everything was just in constant turmoil. My dad's ripped away from me, and my favorite thing my mom liked to, I don't know if it's her favorite, but it was on the list, is take things away from me that I liked or that I enjoyed. So for me, being in a situation where I'm in constant struggle and I'm basically standing on shifting sand all the time was just what I grew up with. So I guess I think we're getting deeper into the situation here, because if I'm just chasing the situation of my childhood, of my household, of when I grew up, and if you want to describe yours, I'm wondering if you can draw a similar corollary. What is the similar situation that so many millennials grew up with that we want to do this? That we have this nihilistic viewpoint?
Well, I think to some extent it might be that millennials grew up, especially American millennials, grew up in a time of abundance. And a lot of things were just assumed and taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
So on the material realm, maybe there wasn't much to accomplish or to achieve, or they didn't really consider material achievements accomplishments in any way, or necessary accomplishments, because they thought they already had it. They had a family, they had a house, they had this and that. A lot of that sort of started crumbling, I think, with the financial crisis
Right.
in 2008. But until that point, the American middle class family was pretty well off and pretty much lived in relative abundance relative to the rest of the world.
Well-
Probably still do, but it's sort of, there's definitely been a lot more uncertainty introduced into the household with that crisis.
If everybody who's watching this now or recording could like, share, and subscribe it helps us out a lot.
Yeah.
I hate saying it, but it's just true.